brainstorming, planning, and executing your project. So, as always, we will start off with the land acknowledgements. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor, care for, and respect all the creation gives to provide us with life. This includes the land, water, air, fire, animals, plants, and our ancestors. The Anishinaabe peoples have utilized this land for millennia, and we would like to acknowledge their direct descendants, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land upon which we live, work, and conduct ourselves. We acknowledge our treaty relationship and responsibilities to both the land and these original peoples. We also recognize that this land is rich in pre-contact history and customs, which include the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, and since European contact, has and continues to become home for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. And it is in the spirit and intent of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, whereby we will collectively care for and respect the land, water, animals, and each other in the interest of peace and friendship and for the benefit of not only ourselves, but our future descendants.
So welcome everyone to the call. My name is Katie. On the call today is Afreen and Georgia. Riley, who's usually on this call, can't be on today. It's also Georgia and Riley's last call with us. So thank you all for joining in to hear more about the project, to learn more about how you can start your project. We're so glad to have you. I'll just remind you that this is a Zoom webinar, so you don't have to worry about your camera or your microphone. Yeah, those things are turned off for you. What you can focus your attention to is the Q&A function where you can put in your questions. We'll answer questions at the end of the presentation. And if you see a question that you also want answered or you're like, yep, that's a good question, you can also upvote questions so that way we know that those ones are very popular and I'll make sure to address those. You can also raise your hand, so if you do need to get our attention right away, then do feel free to use the raise your hand function. And then you might also, of course, have the chat function where you can chat to us if you'd like to ask us a question or something. Or if you can't hear us or if you need any other information you need to let us know, then do feel free to use that chat function there. Cool, so these are, again, just our key dates. So it'll come up again later in the presentation, and you probably already know this, but the projects are due March 26th. So that's this Friday by midnight. So basically all day, you have all day to submit your project ideas. If you're interested in getting that 20 community involvement hours and doing a project to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within our community, then you need to get your project proposal. That's your project idea. Again, if you're doing it as a group, each person will have to submit their project idea. If you're doing one, like if it's a group, then you don't have to submit the same answers, like say 4 times. One person, your designated person, can have the answers submitted, and then the other ones you can write, my project is with Afreen, for example, or my project is with Afreen, see Afreen's answers. That way we know who is starting off with the projects and we know who they're working with as well. So yes, if you already have submitted your idea, then that's amazing. If you already got started, that's even better. If you haven't yet and you're still sort of wondering how you can get started, then you're in the right place. So I'll keep, and then of course we're doing our weekly webinars every Tuesday from 5 to 6, so you can check them out here. Join us in the journey as well.
Awesome. So as Katie had sent out earlier this week, literally yesterday and Friday, we shared our 50-page document, which is the toolkit that will help with your Generation Green project. Even though it's 50 pages, it's packed with lots of information. So these are just some of the key pages that we wanted to draw your attention to, which is the frequently asked questions, feed loop instructions if you're not already familiar on the actual platform, the key dates, which is what we just showed you on the last slide. And then the really important ones are page 21 onwards, where you can have the how to track, measure, and report. And we've included some notes to go along with the presentation just to guide you. And the really good thing about Feed Loop is you can watch this session as many times as you need to understand like how to actually do your greenhouse gas emissions calculations. So On page 32, we have a breakdown of the different steps to go through, and then we also have lots of project examples that can help you get some good ideas on what to do for your 6-week project.
And I'll just say too quickly about the toolkit as well. If you have not received the toolkit yet, do not worry. I am working on putting it up onto Feedloop. So if you have access to Feedloop there, then you'll definitely see it, and you'll have all the links available for you as well, so you can easily grab it. It's also a live link, so we'll be updating information in there. So once you have the link, then you can check back, and if there's any updates to it, we'll email you and let you know. But you can see that they will put more information about for example, things coming up in spring, more information about what that final report will look like for you. But you can go through and you can look at those key pages just so you know what's coming up. Cool. So we're here to talk about how to brainstorm, plan, and actually create your project. So this is the very early stages of a project, like what does it look like, and what you can be doing right now in order to get your idea together. Cool. So when you have an idea, you basically want to start with a brainstorm. So a brainstorm can look like that. You can have your like a little flower picture, or it could be just listing ideas, or it could be walking around or just thinking with yourself, reflecting, using your friends or your family, asking them for ideas as well. So basically when you're starting off a project, you want to define a really clear goal for yourself. You're lucky because we defined your goal for you. Your goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So now that you know that's your goal, what are you going to do about that? What are your objectives? How can we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our own lives? So you want to kind of design that. Part of that is thinking about how design thinking. So trying to shape your mind and shape your ideas to kind of fit within a framework in which you can actually move from those sort of big concept ideas or your really, really over high thinking stuff right into how you can actually do your project. Cool. So what is design thinking? Design thinking is basically a way of breaking down really complex challenges or complex ideas into something very simple that you can easily move through. It's a very popular sort of way of thinking and or breaking down a big project. It's used by lots of great people, usually designers, because it's a framework that really focuses in on people and breaking down solutions to make it very easy and basically breaking down into parts. So if you just flip back to the little slide before frame, you can see it again. So design thinking is by first identifying what it is that you actually want to be seeking or understanding. So that's when you kind of emphasize, you can look, is it a problem that affects lots of other people? Is this a problem within my own life? You try to find who your target is. So in this project, your target would be yourself, or maybe your family. So it could be, and if you're thinking of this as like a big way, it could be like a community or a country or a whole global world. So you kind of look into who is it your target, who is your intended audience. So you say, okay, my intended audience is me. Then you start to think about if I am trying to reduce my greenhouse gases, what do I do? So that's when that brainstorming comes in. You start to think about defining the problem. You think about what you can do. Maybe you're trying new things. You're adopting maybe a more hands-on approach, or maybe you want to do something not within your own home, but something a little bit bigger. That's kind of when you start to break down your idea in the center part. So, and then of course you move into actually implementing your idea. So we'll move back to the next slide. And then I think the one right after. Amazing. So like I said, the emphasizing understanding who your target audience is means understanding what am I actually doing? What is this project actually about? And here is the question. Here's what the actual project is about. It's about how can I reduce my GHG emissions? So for example, I am, like it says there, for example, you are a high school student and you're trying to reduce your greenhouse gases or your carbon footprint, but you don't have a huge big budget, or you're not a government, or you don't have lots of things to do. You have only the things in front of you. What can you actually do? So you have your big overarching question, then you start to move down from there. And that's why we've given you those topics. So we know that like as we said before, the big emitters of GHG within our community are within our home, within our transport, and within the things that we use, like our food waste and other waste products. So knowing that, my question, how do I reduce my greenhouse gas emissions? Knowing that those topics, those ones that we identified for you, that you probably already know as well, are big contributors to greenhouse gas emissions within our community, in our country, then you can start to figure it out. So which one of those, so I know I've gone through a couple of project proposals that have come in, and I've heard from you guys as well. So if you do have other questions, do feel free to keep reaching out to Afreen or I, or to Riley and Georgia as well. But yeah, so you can think about your own life. That's when that brainstorming comes in. You say, okay, well, I've identified that transportation is a big issue within maybe my own life or within our community, and that's going to be the topic that I'm going to focus on particularly. So you start with these questions, then you move down from there. So you start with big ideas and you move down. Is there any questions or anything like that at this point? Do feel free to put them in the chat, and I can definitely answer them for you as well as we think about this design thinking and the way that everything works. So you're very lucky in this toolkit. If you got a chance to look at it, then that's great. But if you haven't, we're just going to show you a little bit about these specific steps that we're talking about that are outlined in our toolkit for you as well. So let's say that, yeah, you've decided, you know your question, you know what you're actually doing, you know the problem, and now you're moving into how to actually find your solutions within your community. So we're going to talk a little bit, you'll see those steps in the toolkit there. And again, it can be very personalized, your project, and that's what we're doing now. We're going to help you. Every project is very different, but this will help you, and we'll provide some examples as well in order to help you figure out what it is that you can do within the time frame, within everything that we're doing, in order to really do what we want you to do, which is reduce greenhouse gas emissions within our community.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Katie. So as we mentioned, the toolkit has a very extensive breakdown on how to identify and brainstorm what you actually want your project to be. So I'm just going to quickly walk through the different sections that we have. So when you are deciding which topic and what project you want to do, you want to look in your home and in your life about what you can actually improve on. So if you're really interested in energy, like look around your home and see if there's any appliances that use a lot of electricity and how you could actually cut those down over a period of time. So I know a big question that both me and Katie have been getting is how long should you be actually implementing one of these projects, and it can vary depending on whichever one you choose. So if you decide to do energy and you say, okay, I want to reduce the amount of usage of our lights in our home, you can do that for 1 week or a period of 3 weeks or a couple days. It's really up to you on how long you want to um, reduce your GHGs for. So that is like one variable that is completely up to you. So another topic is waste. So waste is a very generalized area. So it can be either, your diet or food waste or like recycling and litter. There are just so many different options that you can choose from. So some examples here is reducing your meat consumption or your animal product usage by having a vegan or vegetarian alternative. And another one is perhaps like doing like a clothing drive. So instead of tossing away all the clothes that you have that you no longer use, you could actually be diverting that from the landfill and instead giving it to Goodwill, which could actually eliminate a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So the last one is transportation. We do want to just caution you if you're doing transportation, because the number one thing that we've been seeing is carpooling. So please be aware about COVID restrictions, and obviously your safety comes first. So please have it with people in your social bubble. You don't have to, get random people to carpool with you to school. And it can also look different, like, biking to school or walking to school or taking the public transit instead of driving. So there's a lot of different options for that. So what we are just saying is that really look at your home and see how you can implement a project that is simple and manageable, and you can easily track and measure that impact. So these are just the next steps. So planning, like I'd mentioned before, you can determine the time period you want to execute it, whether it's 3 days, a 1 week, or every Tuesday for 3 weeks. Just determine what are the different variables that you want to be considering, like i.e. the time period, and if you're getting your family's participation or your friends, and then that's when you would submit your project proposal. So just to reiterate, it would only take you about 5 to 10 minutes to complete it, but you just need to describe your initiative, why you chose it, how it'll reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, and how you will measure it. And for that last question, if you do not know how to measure your impact and how to actually calculate, just say, I don't know. And that's totally okay, because Katie and I will be reviewing every single project proposal after everyone's submitted it. And we will get back to you to work one-on-one on how to actually calculate your final total. So I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint now.
Amazing. And in the transition, I'll just take some time just to answer some of the questions that popped up in the Q&A. First of all, if you did submit a project proposal, but you're thinking that maybe you want to go back and edit it, you can go back and edit it up until the deadline for the project idea submission, project proposal submission. That is, so you can go in, you can edit it up until March 26th, basically. So you can go back in, you can change your answers if you'd like. But we also know that just because you submitted your idea doesn't mean that that is going to be the same thing that's going to take you through all the way to the end. Ideas and projects do shift a little bit. So do fill out that form as honestly as you can based on your ideas, but we recognize, of course, that as you go do your project, you'll come across some problems and or some roadblocks that might sort of either help you or might stop you from doing something that you're thinking of doing. And of course, in the world that we live in, there are lots of great projects that might not be possible. Just like Efrain mentioned, the carpooling is a great idea, but it's not feasible in the world that we are in now. So thinking about those types of things, you might come across something like, say you wanted to do a clothing drive. Again, think about the way that the world is. That might not be the best idea. So if that was kind of something you were initially thinking, how can you workshop it to fit it within the 6 weeks, to fit it within what your objectives, what you're actually wanting to do. So yeah, you can think about that as well. You can go back and edit, and then of course your project idea is not be all end all. We know that things changed, and we'll talk a little bit more about what happens when you kind of come across these roadblocks in your project, and about how to submit your final report later on in these actual seminars here that we do. Cool. So now we have a great idea and we're moving into our project planning. So what is project planning? Well, it's actually just the process of creating a scope, defining what it is you want to do, trying to identify the steps that you're going to do to achieve that project or that goal. So that way you have a clear sort of outline to help you as you move along. So if, for example, my project is that I'm going to try to eat less meat, or so that way that my impact on the environment is much smaller. So what would I do? Maybe I would set up those steps to be, okay, from this time, and again, like Efrain said, that the time frame that you want to do it is up to you, as long as you clearly define it in your project plan and in your final report. Again, we'll talk about that later, but in your project plan at least, then that means that you have a clear objective and a clear way that you're going to be doing it. So from Monday next week until say April, say 23rd or something like that, I'm going to not eat meat. What does that mean? So then I can step it up. What will the steps I'm going to do in order to achieve that? Maybe what will I eat instead? Where are my decisions there? So you can lay all that stuff out for yourself. You can do it in a Google form. You can do it in Excel. You can do it on a piece of paper. You can do it however is best for you and what works well within your the way that you sort of plan out your own individual life, and or the way that tools that you like to use. That is totally up to you. So there's no limits in what you can use, but I do suggest that you try to lay out, again, your objective is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and then you can lay out your time frame and what you're actually going to be doing in order to achieve that goal. Yeah, So part of actually planning is identifying the actual problem. So once you know what it is that you're doing, you put down the who, what, where, when, how of your project. That's your project proposal. Part of that, so you've already kind of half done the work when you actually put the project proposal in terms of your planning. And then so it's just taking what you've given to us. And again, like Afreen said, we'll be looking at your project proposals. We're there to help you. We're there to reach out. We can definitely provide more support. It's about taking that and then putting it for yourself. How are you going to actually finish this? Because we want to see you from where you started to where you're going. We want to see that there's an actual difference. We want to see the impact you had. And we hope that you have a really big impact, not only personally, but and then we can put all our numbers together collectively, and we can see how much we reduced in whatever time frame that we set, in order to show how what our little individual steps can do in order to impact our entire community. Cool. Yeah, so you planned your project, you brainstorm, you know what you're doing, you have a great idea, and then you can start doing your project. So part of the project plan is exactly that. It's setting that time frame. It's setting those clear steps. It's knowing that, let's say if I'm going to be using my bike, but I only go to school 3 days a week based on my schedule or whatever. Usually I'm at home the other days. Then 3 days a week I'm going to be biking from this amount of time. So then you can set all of this stuff up and you can start planning your project. We'll go through this a little bit more, but something we wanted to introduce as well. We'll go next slide. Is talking a little bit about your baseline GHG calculation. So something that will help you, especially as you're starting out and you're planning your project, you want to know what it is, what GHG are you actually emitting right now. So you kind of want to set that up. You can see there, those are our big ones. Electricity is kind of like our home. So if you're like, okay, I'm not going to use my blender, for example, because I use my blender every single day and it uses a lot of energy for a certain amount of time, then how much would I usually be using it? So I use my blender for 15 minutes every single day, for example. And then you look at, okay, what type of blender do I have? What is the energy that's consuming? That type of stuff. So you kind of want to set what it is that you would normally do. That will help you at the end when you actually implement your action. You can see that in the program GHG. So as what you're doing, what the actual impact is, what is going on if you change that one step. Cool.
Awesome. So we're going to refer back to the toolkit again. So forgive me, the screen shares, they're not fun because I have to set it up each time to present. So Katie, if there's any questions that you can answer as I set it up, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm just looking through them now. Perfect. There's some questions here about the format of the final submission. It'll be very similar to the way that the project proposal is. It'll be set up in a Google form where you can easily upload material that you need and answer the questions directly into it. And there'll be an opportunity for you to also add in not only just your calculations, there'll be a chance for you to upload those things there into it. We have an Excel form that I will show you, that I'll make available to you. You can put in your calculations, so you can place to upload your calculations, a place to upload, say, pictures if you had any, if you wanted to. If you were doing maybe more of a campaign-oriented project with your individual actions, then you could upload sort of material there for you. So it'll be through a Google form, and the submission will be very easy for you. And that's all I'll say about it yet, because we'll go through that when we're closer to the final submission too.
Okay, awesome. So as Katie mentioned, the baseline emissions are what you're going to do before you actually implement your project. So we wanted to show you just a quick example, and I have created a very thorough breakdown of how to actually calculate your emissions, but I would like to reassure you that we do have an automated spreadsheet where you can input specific numbers and it'll give you the total, but we just wanted to give you the reasoning behind of where these numbers are coming from, because it's really important to understand what is the baseline versus your program emissions, and why those numbers are actually being facilitated. So if we take the example of Katie, who attended the Gen Green conference, and she found out that animal agriculture has a pretty large carbon footprint. So instead of going fully vegan or vegetarian, she decides to just do meatless Mondays for 4 weeks. So for 4 Mondays, she decides instead of having meat with meals, she'll just replace it with a plant-based option. So before she actually implements those meatless Mondays, she's going to begin with her baseline emissions. So the four key things that she needs to know is the amount of days that she's recording how much meat they consume on a typical Monday, the amount of meat consumed, the type, and then just noting down the carbon intensity of each food, which is found on table 6 on page 22. And if you find that you can't find the specific carbon intensity for a specific food, please feel free to just reach out to Katie or I, because we do have many reports that we can look at and evaluate to give you that number, so you don't have to stress out or be worried that you can't find it. So what Katie does is on a Monday, she still eats her typical meals without the meatless Monday. So for Katie, she had 0.5 kg of beef for lunch, and she had 0.5 kg of pork for dinner. So the way that she found those weights was just on the package. So before her parents had cooked dinner, or whether Katie decided to cook herself that day, she just noted down the weights, and then as well as the carbon intensity. So that's all that is needed for your baseline emissions. You're just seeing on a regular day, how do you actually, um, you know, live your life without your 6-week project. So I'm gonna go back to the slideshow again. And if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. We're here to support you and make sure that it's not confusing and that you're able to do all of these calculations.
Cool. And yeah, as we move back to the presentation, I don't see any open questions right now, but it's a very simple in terms of like the how you actually put everything together. Right now, everything might be come in pieces, and then as you move towards, and we talk a little bit more about how the final submission is going to work, that's when we put all these pieces together. So you think about that big goal, which is how do I reduce my GHG emission? So that's your right now. You should be thinking about that overall goal, and then what are you going to do about it. So you think about your objective, you think about what your steps are going to take, you lay out those steps for yourself, and then you can start recording your process in Excel, in a Google form, in a notebook or something like that. So that way you can easily track what it is that you're doing, and you set up your time frame for how long you'll be doing it. So
Awesome. And just one thing to note, if you want to ever go to the HCC website, we do have our past student projects there. A couple of them are very large ideas because they had more time to actually complete their projects. So if you just want to look through them, it's really inspiring to see what other students had done last year.
amazing. So these are a couple tips for when you're actually starting to do your project. This is after you've submitted your idea and you're starting to get into it. You definitely want to know, like I mentioned, a way for you to keep track of your progress, to record what you're doing, record what's going on, what days you're doing things. So that way it's a good reference for yourself. When you get down to actually writing the final report, you don't have to think back and try to remember what you were doing on specific days. You already have it recorded for yourself. So whether that's in the Google form, whether that's in an Excel, whether it's in a notebook, just try to keep record of things as you're doing them. Calculate those base calculations. Free walk through it in a second. I'm going to show you this calculation form that we'll share with you. So that way you can get some of these numbers, and now you can start sort of building your idea there. You can brainstorm if you're at that brainstorming stage. Try to brainstorm with friends, family, maybe teachers. If you need to try to workshop your idea with myself or with a friend, I've already gotten great emails from great projects that I'll be responding to as soon as possible. So if you're waiting for a response, it's coming, don't worry. So yeah, we're great resources for you. Like a friend said, you can go back and look at past projects. You can talk to, if you know somebody who did a project last year, maybe you can ask them as well what you think. You can start investigating with others, bouncing that idea off, just make sure that you're on the right track. um, yeah, you start looking about how you actually want to do your project based on what the idea is. We're, of course, encouraging projects that you can do just within your own household or bubble within yourself because it's very simple, something you can easily do, and you can really look in and reflect on your own actions. Another thing that would be great when you're starting putting out is try to learn as much as possible. Maybe you don't know what type of car your parents drive, for example, and that does make a difference in terms of your calculation. So you want to look into that. Or maybe you're thinking a little bit bigger in terms of your ideas and you want to know what is the impact of me leaving my lights on or that type of stuff. Just be curious, keep looking into what it is that you're doing and asking, is this the best project for me? Does this work for my schedule? Learn as much as possible as you go through because, again, this is really for you to answer that big question, how can I reduce my GHG emissions? Like what actions can I do? So you can use and you can explore, put your idea in, and even if it changes, that's great. That's okay. Just try to get as close as you can to that big question, which is what we want to see. Cool. So these, of course, are our next steps. You know what they are. You're going to be deciding what your projects are. You're going to be putting in your project idea into that Google form. Sorry, that Google form right there. The link is now in the chat. If you're seeing it on Feedloop, I'll make sure to pop it in there. Yep, it's there for you as well. So you can click that link and submit your project. Yeah, to make sure you're choosing something that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, because again, you'll be doing this for like at least a good chunk of time. And we're asking you to put a lot of effort and your own inspiration and time behind it. So definitely choose something that you are passionate about and something that does make a big impact because we want to see that impact. We want to see what we can do, what the HTSB students can do, and we can show that to next generations, to our teachers, to everybody about what it is that we can actually do within our frame. Cool. So I'm also, okay, yeah, let's go through this. So this is a checklist because this is a big question. Free, I'll pass it to you and then I'll pull up the calculation form.
Okay, so as Katie pulls that up, we just want to make sure that you know what is required to actually get the 20 community involvement hours because there have been a lot of questions about this. So it is mandatory to watch at least 2 of the spring webinars live or the recordings of it on Feedloop. So if you're attending this webinar, congratulations, you have finished 1. You just need to attend 1 more, or if you can't actually attend the Tuesday 5 to 6 p.m. time slots, the recording is on Feedloop right after, so you are more than welcome to watch it there. And we're able to see the attendance through the recording and through the live webinar. So don't worry about us not knowing that you've watched the recording. You have an attendance sheet that does generate on Feedloop. So the second one is watching the recording of how to track, report, and measure. So this was in the this was one of the sessions in the Generation Green conference that happened a few weeks ago. So if you've already watched this, amazing. If you haven't, this is a really amazing recording that we have that will detail how to calculate your greenhouse gas emissions. So please, this is mandatory. You must watch this. The third one is to obviously submit the project proposal, which Katie and I keep mentioning over and over and over again because we want to make sure you get it in before that deadline. It is so important because we'll be able to give you feedback and guidance on whatever amazing idea you come up with. And then obviously you're going to spend a few hours doing the actual implementation of your GHG project. And then on April 23rd, the final report is due. So all 5 of these are mandatory. They must be completed before April 23rd, and that is how you will get your 20 community involvement hours. So please follow this. If you do not do one of these things, unfortunately, you will be disqualified and you won't receive those 20 hours. There's no way to instead get 15 or 10 or 2. It is either 20 community involvement hours or 0. So you do want to make that very, very clear. And I'm going to pass it off to Katie so that she can share the sheet.
Cool. Again, this is something that we'll share with you. This is a resource that was put together last year. So if you did do a project last year, then you're probably familiar with it. Um, and this will, I think, will help you as you think about your calculations. If you've moved past the brainstorming and putting your idea in it, this is kind of the next stage. So as you can see, here is going to be a very, very helpful tool for you. So I know that this you're probably dying to have, and we'll definitely get it to you. So if, for example, if you're doing a project on transportation, then you start with your baseline GHG emissions. If you are wondering how long should I be measuring my GHG baseline emissions for, my suggestion would be to try to do it for at least a week, minimum maybe for 3-4 days. Try to do it a little bit longer so that way you have better baseline that you can compare your program, or try to make it so that's basically it. That's my suggestion there. But however many days that you decide to do your baseline, put it into the sheet. Then you put in, if I'm doing transportation, how often am I driving? How often or how far am I doing all of these activities? If it's on a bus, you can put your number in there. And then all of the things, the numbers that you need are on the side for you as well. So you can start filling out that sheet, and then everything will be sort of helpfully calculated for you in this actual sheet here. If you're wondering what are those calculations, then that's when I suggest you go back to the toolkit and you can see those helpful guides in the webinar summaries area for track, measure, record. Watch, track, measure, record, because Denise and Mike break down how these actually calculations work for you. That's just great knowledge for yourself, so you know what it is going on behind the scenes of the sheet here. So, and then of course, once you're doing your project, then you can put the other flip side, the numbers in here. Same if you're doing something in your home electricity, a home project, then you want to start identifying what it is, what appliance are you looking at, what's going on there. And if you're doing sort of a mix of different topics, then you're going to be using sort of a mix of these different sheets. Again, this will come to you and we'll sort of explain a little bit more about how you can actually fill out this sheet for yourself. And then of course, if you're doing food, which we talked about as well, it's a very similar process. So again, this sheet is coming for you. Didn't want to give it to you too early because we'd like you to sort of brainstorm around an idea a little bit more before you start getting into these calculations. But calculations and knowing your impact is very crucial for the project. So of course, this sheet is coming your way soon. Awesome. Yeah, I see some questions in the chat, so I think we can bounce to those questions as well. But of course, Freen and I, like we said, we're here every single week, once a week, to help you with different areas of the project. So we encourage you, of course, we tell you that 2 of them are mandatory, but we encourage you to attend them or watch as many as you can because they were designed to help you build this project. And we want to make sure that you do the best project you possibly can. So remember that we're here for you. We're here for you from the beginning. We're here to you all the way to the end. So we're with you no matter what. Again, the project is due this Friday, so do not forget that deadline. Get your project idea in. Again, if you're doing it as a group, then we'd like for each person to submit a project proposal so we know who is coming into the program. It won't work if only one person submits their name, because even though we know probably that you're working in a group, we just want to make 100% sure that who is getting those 20 hours and what they're doing, because it is, like Efreen said, you get 20 hours, so you don't get anything. And we want to make sure that you get your 20 hours because we know you're here and you're willing to do the work, and we want to make sure that you succeed in what you're doing. So we need to keep track of where you are. So part of that is putting your submission form in. So if you're doing it in a group, whether it's 2 to 5 or whatever, then definitely submit your form. You can make reference to your group members. You do not have to fill out, if you're doing a group form, maybe you fill out one with all detailed answers and other ones would just reference the other one. If you're just doing it by yourself or maybe with a family member or something like that, well, family member applies as group, but say you're just doing it by yourself, then feel free to just fill out that project form and answer those questions to the best of your ability, and we'll be helping you through the entire process as well. If you're looking for these slides, they are always up on FeedLoop. You can watch everything on FeedLoop. The toolkit will be there for you on FeedLoop. I'll put lots of links for you on FeedLoop, so there's lots of things you can find there. But you can also find it on our website. So if you go to climatecollective.ca/gengreen2021, you'll find everything there. The recordings, the slides, everything will go up there for you as well. If you're looking for that project proposal form where you missed the link here and you're not sure where to find it, go to the website because it is there for you to click. Of course, our next webinar will be talking a little bit more about actually doing the project. We'll go through some of the ways that you can implement your project. So stay tuned for that. Again, everything will be up online for you. And then, of course, not only is there a wrap-up event on May 12th for you the potential to win prizes for your nice projects, as well as be recognized for the work that you do. There's also great things coming up in spring, planned and designed by our youth stakeholders. So there's lots of fun stuff coming, and it'll all come through you through FeedLoop as well. So if you don't have access to FeedLoop, then definitely maybe we can pop that link in the chat for you as well. If you're calling us through FeedLoop already, then you know you have access to FeedLoop and you are totally set. But if you aren't coming through FeedLoop, then so sorry. then definitely fill out that form so you can get you access there.
Awesome. Cool. So I know there's lots of questions. Unfortunately, I cannot see them. So Katie.
Oh yeah. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so question 1. If I'm measuring something like electricity, can I use electricity bills and other resources to help? What can I do to help measure that specific aspect? Cool, great question. As you saw in that sheet there, we kind of look, you have to look a little bit more specifically at the appliance that you're using and the amount of energy that appliance uses. So if you're doing a project that is some sort of appliance-based or some sort of home project, then yeah, you definitely want to identify what it is you're doing, maybe the make of it, how long you're using it for. Electricity bills and other resources like that will help because it'll kind of give a great overview, but it's not as great about identifying specific appliances, which I think that's why your question is a really great question. Because of course, hair dryer you might use for a couple minutes, whereas a washing machine, for example, you'll use for a much longer time. So you'll have to know which appliance you're looking into, how long are you running it for, a day or weekly, and then how much energy it uses. And you saw that sheet briefly, and we'll give this to you as you move into implementing your project. Different appliances use different amounts of energy, so that does affect how much GHG it produces. Hope that answers your question. If you're thinking about a home appliance type project, definitely fill out the project proposal form and talk about why you're choosing that project. And then if you need to calculate it, you can just say use the sheet or unsure, or that you'll look into some things like that so you can answer that specific information there. So thanks for your question. Cool. And then yes, there's more questions about how do I calculate if I was driving? What numbers do I use? Again, great question. I think you saw it in that calculation sheet that what you'll need to be doing if you're doing a transportation-based project is you need to know about how long are you going to be traveling in whatever you're using. Say I'm in a car, how far am I driving? And you can use in your actual car, you'll see the different miles, for example, there. But as something I could use as well as Google Maps. So if you put it in your home address and say I'm driving to school back and forth every day and put in my school address, they'll show you the kilometers for that distance, and that could be a great way for you to find that information there. And then of course that type of information if you're in a car, if you're in a bike or a bus, well, specifically for car, I guess, rather than bike and bus, but for a car you need to know what type of car, because different cars will use different amounts of fuel, and that will affect your greenhouse gas emission numbers. So again, that stuff is in this calculation sheet for you, but as you're sort of planning your idea, if you're thinking more of a transportation type project, then I would suggest, thinking about, those little details, like are you going to be driving 3 or 4 days a week? What is it like? How far are you going? So you can start recording that and you can see that difference. Another question about calculation for food. So if you're thinking more of a food or a waste type project, it'll get very specific. You'll have to know exactly what type of food items you're doing. In the toolkit, which we didn't get to show today, but if you do get a chance, if you got that link for that toolkit, I can't remember what page it's on, but it's somewhere near the bottom of the toolkit. I want to say like page 40 something. There's a food waste guide as well. It gives a lot of information about how you can start measure and different types of food. Again, in that calculation sheet, you'll see the weights and the actual impacts of different food items. So for a food type project, you might want to specify, are you thinking about meat? Are you thinking about something else? What type of meat? All these things are going to be very important as you build that project in, and that becomes part of your project planning. Is like, what type of food are you going to look at? Um, how are you going to measure it? Is it going to be, you're going to have to do the weight? So do you have the right tools for that? It's about thinking about those through those details that'll help you build in your project. So as you started brainstorming and planning, as you're putting in your idea, think about what it is that your intentions are, and that will help you as you narrow down your project idea. This spreadsheet I will give access to everybody who's submitted in their project idea. So if you do want, again, to have access to these tools, we want to get those 20 hours. Even if you're doing a group project, do submit your project proposal. Again, if you're doing it with others, then you can just say, I did my project with Afreen. Check Afreen's answers. You can do that. It doesn't, you have to answer the whole form. It's just a way for us to know that you're in the process with us, and make sure that you get access to the same resources. Um, it is helpful if one of your friends is kind of sharing things with you. That's great, and I love that. But I want to make sure that the hours go to who they want to go, and make sure that you get the same resources and the same access. So I would suggest all you got to do is just put your name in, let them know you're working with so and that way everything's there for us, so we can make sure that you're on this journey too, and we know who to connect with. Even if it's a group, if you want to connect with your whole group, we'll make sure to message the whole group, not just one person. But we just need to know who's doing what and where.
And I just want to bring up like page 24 and 25, they do have the tables for the carbon intensity. So especially for the consumption values, they're all here in table 6. So if you're eating lamb, which I love lamb, it's 39.2, and you can use this as a reference. And we also have the different databases that you can go to as well if you can't find the specific food that you are reducing or are replacing it with. And if you still can't find it, then you have our emails, and we are more than happy to help you research and give you that answer.
And also say too, like part of those resources, we're also making sure that these numbers are up to date to 2021, 2020 type standards. So so that's why we're double checking. So on that sheet in the toolkit as well, you'll see that some of the forms are maybe from previous years. It's because those forms haven't been updated yet. Some reports come out every 4 years or some every year. But if there is a current report, we're going to make sure that you have access to it so you can get the most up-to-date numbers. So you'll see that stuff up in the toolkit when you look at it. And if you haven't got a chance to look at it yet, then again, I'll put it up on FeedLoop. If you have, and you're just sort of scrolling through it because it's 50 pages and there's a lot of stuff there, then you'll make your way to the end or the last couple pages of there you go, in the toolkit. So you'll see all that stuff there for you as well. It's all live links. Oh, sorry, live links. So when you click on it, it'll take you right there. It's very simple and easy.
So sorry, guys. I thought I was sharing, and I was like referencing and pointing to all of these tables, and oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Here on these pages, it's like page 24 onwards. It's the how to track, measure, report. There's these tables here that you can see the carbon intensity. So specifically for the food waste example, when I was referring to lamb, the 39.2, it's right here. You can see my blue pointer, and then these studies right here are some other examples of where you can find more information if they're not already provided in this table. Great. Now that you've seen that, Katie, you can continue.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, and it's really great. So definitely make sure you have access to this. Again, it'll be up on FeedLoop for you, so it'll be very easy for you to find. A question here about how open-ended is the project? Do you want to do something more specific, or can it be sort of a more generalized project? This is a great question. If you're looking kind of at past projects, again, you'll see that their scope was much bigger than our scope here. Our suggestion is to pick a project that you can do easily, and that is kind of up to you. So we've gotten lots of great ideas, some that are very specific to your own individual actions, some that are more larger campaigns, some more about maybe waste or litter, picking up things on the, I'm losing words, but you know, I mean, the project is really based on what you can feasibly do within the time frame. So we don't want to ask you to go outside of your way and spend a lot of time doing a project that takes up over your life, and then you can't do your schoolwork the way that you can. We want to do something that is feasible to you. So we have suggestions. We have provided you some project examples, but the project, of course, is your project. It's your, whatever you're inspired to do, we want to help and support you. So if you are thinking of maybe a more planting, or maybe something, you're going to collect certain items and try to donate them, or try to make sure that they're properly disposed of, and that's your project, there is flexibility. There is an open-endedness to this project. And when we review your project proposals, we'll be reaching out to you in order to help you develop your project to make sure it's the best possible, and to provide you with the supports. The sheets, the toolkits, they're all there for you to make sure that your project is the best possible, and that's what we want to do as well. So yeah, when you're looking at past projects, when you're thinking about your own project, when you're brainstorming through your own ideas and what's feasible within your life, then do take all that stuff into consideration. And of course, we're here to help you to bounce ideas off of if you need that extra support. Cool. Yeah, if you do need a link for the toolkit, it's going to be up on Feedloop. I'm going to make sure that it's accessible to you. It did go out in an email, but I know that emails can easily come and then go, and in your inbox it can be hard to find. So if you're looking for any of the resources, it'll be either up on our website and or on Feedloop. So that'll be a great way for you to check. And again, the core will be emailing you different things as well. No, we don't have a set, sorry, the question, Afreen, is there a certain amount of reduction that has to be done, like a minimum or a maximum? The answer to that is no. So we want you to try to reduce as much greenhouse gas emissions as you possibly can within the scope of your project. Of course, we have big numbers. We can give a max and a minimum, but we don't want to do that, because we want this project to be personal to you. And we want you to try your best to try to reduce as much as you can within your project. Part of your final report too is talking about how the process that you went through, and providing like what was the actual outcomes of your project. That's providing your calculations and those difference, and talking about what went on in your project. So that those types of what went on in your project you can explain within your final report. That's a little teaser. You'll see a little bit more about those final steps too in the toolkit, but we'll talk a little bit more about how to submit your report later. So you can really just be thinking about how to build the sort of the beginnings of your project now, and then the ends of your project will come later. But yeah, so there's no max and minimum. It's just set your project goals, set your intentions, start building your project, and then get going with it.
Yeah. And I also shared the toolkit link into the
perfect.
I don't know if people on Feedloop can see that, but
I think Georgia will put it into Feedloop. She's great. And you can see that it is a link. That's a live link. So if there's any updates, we'll let you know. But you can also check back, and you can see that if there's any updated information, we'll let you know which page. So there'll be everything there for you as well. So you don't need to go looking for another link. This is the link, and you got it. And if there's any updates or anything we'd like to put in there, more updates about what's coming up for spring break, other events that we're doing, that we'll make sure to put that in there for you to find very easily. Cool. Again, if you are watching this with friends, or sort of shared in a sort of digital way, I encourage you all to submit a project form for yourself. That way we know that your group is all together working, and that you are moving towards further journey with us, so that we know to give you the credit where credit is due to get your 20 hours. So yeah, however you're kind of coming in to watch these webinars, if you're watching them live with us and asking your questions, if you choose to watch them at a different date, if you're watching them with others, yeah, I would encourage you to kind of let us know what's going on, or sign up on the Google form if you're choosing to watch it on maybe somebody else's Feedloop. If you need access to Feedloop and you want to watch them on your own time, please get in touch with us. That way we can know that you've actually seen the videos. It's important to us that we know that you've seen at least 2. However you're doing that, if you're signing up through the Google Forms, which are all up on the website for you, if you are signing in through Feedloop, then you're already solid, because we can check in, we can see which ones you've watched and where you've watched them, and we can check in on that stuff for you. So that way it's sort of very easy, and we will be doubly checking that. So if you are watching on somebody else's computer, that's a great way to get engaged, but we want to make sure that we know that you are watching that material. So you definitely need to be signing up for our materials, putting in your project proposal form for yourself, so that way we can follow up with you directly. Hope that answers that question there. And I can be very clear that we want to make sure that if you're working as a project, you're working as a group, that each person puts in your project proposal form and make reference to each other's members. So that way, again, that we know that it's you that is being part of this project, that you are getting your 20 hours. It's 20 or nothing. So I want to make sure that every person in your group gets the 20 hours. And if you're doing the project by yourself, that you get your 20 hours as well, for putting in your project idea, for moving through these workshops with us, through submitting your project at the end. Again, we're here for you and want you to push you through, take that journey with us from the start to finish, so that we can give you what you deserve. If I stop using an appliance entirely for a certain time period, will my program emissions be zero? That's a great question. I don't know, Freen, do you know the answer to that question? I feel like I don't. I feel like yes, it would be, because technically, if you stop using something entirely, then it would be zero. But I feel like that's a great question.
Depending on what appliance it is, yes, it
Right.
technically, like one of the answers you can put in is zero, but the yeah, I think it's just dependent on which appliance you're using, because there are ones like with lights, there is no way to just say zero altogether, because it does function during the day. Thank you. And so, sorry if my mom came in. Um, yeah, so yes, technically it could be zero to answer your question. Just it depends on which appliance it is. Short and sweet.
Yeah, that's what I think as well.
Because it is influenced by the number of days you do it as well. And whatever your program emissions are, in the end, the final total that you'll actually be reporting back to us is the total emissions. So that's your baseline with your program emissions, that kind of together they create like one total, and that's the one you'll be reporting back.
Cool. And our final question, and then we'll sign off, is when submitting your project, do we just submit our calculations? The answer to that is no. There is lots of other things that we want to ask from you for your project. Part of the project, and a very crucial part, is the calculations, because that really emphasizes your impact. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about the final submission when we get closer to putting in that final report, but part of what you're telling us is part of what this isn't actually in the proposal. We want to know in that final submission what your intentions were. What did you do? That's why when you're starting out now, when you're thinking through your idea, when you're putting your project together, when you figure out a way that you're going to be tracking your impact, it's good to start early and set up a system for yourself, because when it comes back down to that closer to the submission, to closer to April 26th, and you have to go back to the beginning and think about all this stuff, it's much more difficult. So I would suggest for you to set up a process right now, figure out what your idea is, figure out what your intentions are, start tracking, start putting that process in, whether it's on a notebook, a Google form, a Google sheet, or some other tool that you'd like to use that's accessible to yourself. And then I would start setting up these processes, so that way you're easily following through with those, with that intention, that when you come to submit your final report, you already have a bunch of calculations, you already have a bunch of information that you can pull from to build that final report. It's not going to be too much. We're not going to ask you to write a lot, but there are other aspects to the final report, and we'll talk about that at a different date. But thank you guys all for joining us today. It's just hitting 6. I don't want to keep you past our time. If you do have any other questions, then definitely feel free to reach out to Afreen or I by our emails. You can find them on our website. You can find them, we will put them in the chat really quick so you can find them there. And if you have, if you haven't already done it, then I strongly encourage you to put your project idea into our project proposal, so that way we know that you're here and you're ready to do the project, and that you're ready to go on this journey with us. So thanks again for being here, and get your projects in.
Thanks, everyone. Actually, Katie, there was one more question.
Oh, sorry.
Following up on that last question, could something like cutting out usage of a hairdryer fall under that category? Yes, if you cut out your hairdryer, Ivy, if you're still here, I'm so sorry. Yes, it would fall under that category. I would look at the Excel spreadsheet and you just need to input those numbers into your baseline. So feel free to email me after this session and we can work through that together so that you know how to calculate that. Now we're good.
Yay! Amazing. I can see Ivy was here, so she heard your answer. Yay!
Awesome. Thanks, Ivy.
Cool. And yeah, if you have any other questions or if you're coming through the project proposal form, do feel free to email us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible so that we can help you out. And on that note, yeah, goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
I realized my camera wasn't on.